Thanks everyone for joining us on today's edition of Politics on Sunday, and we're live from Abuja studio. I am Femi Akonde. President Bola Tinubu is still in Paris, France on a short working visit. The president says during his visit, he will appraise his administration's mid-term performance and assess key milestones. He will also use the retreat to review the progress of ongoing reforms and engage in strategic planning ahead of his administration's second anniversary. This period of reflection will inform plans to deepen ongoing reforms and accelerate national development priorities in the coming year. The president has also met with a State Department representative from President Donald Trump's administration, Mr. Masad Bulus, Senior Advisor for Africa. The meeting focused on developing a strategic economic and security partnership between Nigeria, Africa, and the United States, anchored on mutual respect, prosperity, and regional stability. But back here in Nigeria, a lot has been happening in the political space, including in the economy and security. As we speak, major streets in Abuja are already dotted with re-election billboards and banners from President Bola Tinubu. Most of these campaigns are sponsored by supporters of the president. But now news just in from the presidency says the presidency, according to a statement signed by the president's senior advisor on information and strategy, Bayo Ononuga. It says the presidency has observed with dismay the increasing number of billboards in some cities promoting the 2027 campaign for President Bola Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima. The statement says noting is that some of these billboards with pictures of the president and his wife, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, emblazoned on them are springing up in Abuja and Kano in particular. President Tinubu and Vice President Shettima said they greatly appreciate their teaming and loyal supporters across the country for their enthusiasm and continuing support. But the two leaders do not support any campaign that breaches the laws of the land. The electoral law that guides the conduct of elections and political campaigns forbids any form of campaign for the 2027 general election. Premature campaigning can undermine the integrity of the electoral process and create unfair advantages. Well, that's according to a statement signed by Bayo Ononuga. There's also an ongoing mutation among politicians as different groups hold talks about possible coalitions with the singular goal of unseating President Bola Tinubu in 2027, although the president is yet to comment on whether he will seek a re-election or not. But the Tinubu presidency is currently excited about the recent Fitch ratings that has upgraded Nigeria's long-term foreign currency issuer default rating to B from B- with a stable outlook. The presidency believes this is an endorsement of the policy reforms, including exchange rate liberalization, monetary policy tightening, and steps to end deficit monetization and remove fuel subsidies. But what does all of this mean for Nigerians, and how will it impact governance as the Tinubu administration approaches its mid-term mark? To help put the issues into proper context and get a sense of some issues in the polity, I am joined by Reno Omokri, a political analyst, columnist, and author. Hello, sir. It's good to have you join us on Politics on Sunday.
Thank you for having me, Femi. God bless you.
Well, before we go into matters of the economy, especially the Fitch ratings, I would like to first start with security. We saw that statement or alarm raised by the governor of Borno State talking about a resurgence of the Boko Haram insurgency in Borno State. And the comment of the Minister of Information, he came out to also put it in proper context what he meant when he responded to that. But the governor, Borno State governor, was also asked a question where he said, well, the Minister of Information is naive and do not know exactly what is happening across the country. Some people say, well, these are very strong statements. The Minister of Information for the federal government, naive and not knowing what is happening in the country. How would you respond to all of this, and what does this mean for Nigeria's security, especially with the governor's claim of a resurgence of Boko Haram?
Well, the governor was responding to fake news in that instance. I think I watched the video, it was on News Central. He was actually responding to fake news because Vanguard, Punch, and The Nation actually carried the proper context of what the minister said. The minister never said that the governor was ignorant. An online blog, they made a headline, and that's just generally the nature of these blogs. To drive traffic, they're going to sex up their headlines. And the governor was responding to that, and the minister never said anything like that. I actually, earlier today, sent a transcript of what the minister said to a senator from Borno State, so he could actually pass it on to the governor. What the minister said is that the governor, Professor Zulum, is a respected leader. That's a direct quote. So he praised him, he empathized with him, then he now went into the nitty-gritty of what was happening in Borno State. So he talked about Operation Hadinkai. He also talked about the terror leaders, the leaders of Boko Haram and the Islamic State in the West African province that had been killed, including Danfulani Fari, including Amir Modu, including several others like Munzir Azika and others that were killed. Then he talked about what was planned for the future. He talked about Operation Kalachen Wuta. So this is going on with Operation Hadinkai. And one of the things that the governor has to understand is that if he says these things in public, it emboldens the terrorists, because it looks as if, okay, well, the federal government and the state government are at loggerheads. And don't forget that that's what these terrorists want. So there are probably better ways that the governor could have communicated with the minister. First and foremost, the minister did not say that. And then even after the minister had spoken, the minister also issued a clarification statement, because we all saw that news headline from the blog, and a lot of people were alarmed by that. The minister actually issued a statement. So there was absolutely no reason to say that the Minister of Information is suffering from naivete. I mean, if you look at the history of Nigeria, we've only had two ministers that are at this level, Alex Akinyele and this current minister, people who are PR professionals. So we have something in Nigeria called the NIPR, National Institute of Public Relations. So these are two professionals that are there. And if you look at the statement that the minister made, I mean, it was quite detailed. What people have to understand there is this, is that Nigeria has a border in that region with Cameroon to the east and then with Niger to the north. And so no matter how clean we do ourselves, no matter how much we attack terror, no matter how much we put systems in place, we cannot go into our neighboring countries and then just begin to attack terror there. So what we have to do, while we are working on our situation at home, if you have people coming in from Niger, because you have to understand, Niger ended their partnership with France and with the United States. And so there's been like a resurgence of terror activities in Niger. If people come into Nigeria from Niger, there's very little you can do except you can fight them in Nigeria, but you can't enter into Niger and fight them. If people come in from Cameroon, you can fight them in Nigeria, but you cannot enter into Cameroon. So unless our neighboring countries are coming into the war on terror with the same commitment as Nigeria, we're going to be having these opportunistic crimes that are happening in Niger. And if you look at what's happening right now, if I ask you a question, name the leaders of Boko Haram today. You cannot name the leaders of Boko Haram today or ISWAP because they have been decimated. What you now have are a ragtag group of people who are using IEDs, improvised explosive devices. So they just put them on the road. And it's very hard for you to attack people or to, let's say, neutralize people who are using IEDs. If you look at Borno State, for instance, Borno State is 3 times the size of Belgium. If you go back to the Second World War, it took the Allies 5 years to clear Belgium of the insurgents. Now, if you now look at Borno State, no government in this world will be able to put soldiers everywhere simultaneously in Borno State. But the main work has been done. If you look at the Timbuktu Triangle, that region has been cleared. But as long as Nigeria shares borders with Cameroon, with Niger Republic, you're going to have people coming in, no matter how much we clean ourselves up.
Mr. Amokri, we have also seen serious security concerns in Plateau State, now beyond Borno State now, and I'm sure you will agree with me that maybe the back and forth between the governor and the minister is a huge distraction from the merits of the matter, which is tackling insecurity in the country. The situation in Plateau State has also called for, serious concern. This has been happening for decades, and it appears as if the military, the government, and all relevant authorities have been unable to find a lasting solution to this crisis. We do not know if it's if there are communal clashes, if it is the farmer-herders clashes, or if it's just an attack by a group of criminals. Nobody has been able to put a finger to what is happening in Plateau State. Why has this lingered for?
What I'm saying is that these things have been happening for centuries. They are not new. If you go back to the pre-colonial records, even Lord Lugard was dealing with them about 100 years ago. They are not new. The reason why we are hearing about them more often now is because news is instantaneous. We've got social media. So these things have been happening, but you have to look at them from a database perspective. These attacks are actually reducing. I'll give you a very good example. If you recall, in 2018, General Buhari had to go to Benue State, and while he was there, he expressed surprise. He said he had ordered his Inspector General of Police to go to Benue State, and while he was talking to the people, they told him the Inspector General of Police never came, and he said, I am hearing for the first time that after ordering the Inspector General of Police to come to Benue State, he never came. But what happened after these attacks in Plateau State? The very next day, the National Security Advisor was there, and he vowed and he said that these things will no longer happen. These things will not stand. So we're seeing increased responsiveness from the federal government. Look, if you look at this National Security Advisor, since that rule has been created, Malam Nuhu Ribadu is actually the best National Security Advisor Nigeria has had.
But Mr.
Mokri,
this is not the first time this is happening in Plateau State under this administration. This is actually the second time. Remember December 2023, that was under this current administration. There was that attack around the Mango area in Plateau State also.
Yeah, so you're talking about an administration that is 2 years, and then it has happened twice. If you go back in history with other administrations, at the 2-year mark, it had happened about 18 times. If you go back to Yar'Adua administration, go back to what happened at Dogo Nahawa. If you go back to the Yar'Adua administration, Yar'Adua was in power for less than 2 years before, unfortunately, he passed away. It had happened in Plateau State about, I think, a total of about 17 times. So we are seeing a reduction of the incidences. Now, I mean, it's not right to start comparing, okay, less people died in this government, so we are doing well. No, any death is regrettable. But while you're criticizing the situation, you have to put it into proper perspective. The incidences in Plateau State are reducing. But it's not just that they are reducing, the responsiveness of the government. So you're having an attack on a Monday, and then by Tuesday, the National Security Advisor is there. Troops are there. The route where these people came in, you have troops going there, you have helicopters, you have helicopter gunship. That is responsiveness. So Nigerians have to realize that there is no country that is free of these kinds of criminality and terror. But the thing is that what is the response of the government? In Nigeria, the response of the government has been improved. And so we need to recognize that, and we need to work with them to make sure that these things are reduced to the barest minimum.
All right. From security now, let's talk about the economy. The recent Fitch rating upgrading Nigeria to B from B-. An endorsement of President Bola Tinubu's policy reforms, But for the generality of Nigerians, what does this mean? Because it appears as if it's only the presidency that is excited about these. Nigerians are yet to understand how will this translate to meaningful economic growth and empowerment for them.
If you read the Fitch report, because a lot of things there's one common practice that we have as Nigerians. We just read headlines and then we postulate on the headlines. I read the Fitch report. You understand, Fitch are the #1 ratings agency in the world, followed by Standard & Poor's, followed by KPMG. Now, if you read the Fitch report, they talked about a number of things. One of the things that they talk about foreign inflow into Nigeria. Foreign inflow into Nigeria right now has increased by a factor of 5-fold. So there's more foreign direct investment coming into Nigeria. The inflation has reduced from 34.84% to about 24% in the month of February. They also talked about reforms of the administration. They talk about the removal of subsidy. They talk about the flotation of the naira. These things are spurring in more local production. That's why we are seeing that Nigeria is now exporting more. So for the first time listen to this, in 50 years, we've had record-breaking trade surpluses, whereby we are importing less than we are exporting. So we are exporting more goods to other countries than we are importing. And this is very good because it's making sure that our naira is flowing within Nigeria and then foreign currency is actually flowing in Nigeria. Nigeria is moving towards food security. That's what was also included in the Fitch ratings. So the last time Fitch adjusted their ratings for Nigeria was on Friday, November 11, and they downgraded Nigeria. Now they've upgraded Nigeria. So there is progress. The reforms of the Tinubu administration are actually working. And I think it was Peter Obi who was saying that, no, our economy had collapsed. I'm going to ask Nigerians, between Peter Obi and Fitch ratings, who are you going to believe? Peter Obi did not give any empirical data. What he said is that people who used to feed are now begging. That's emotion. That's populism. That is not data. If you look at the data in Nigeria right now, you're seeing that Nigerians, their purchasing power has increased. And how do we know that? You know, the minimum wage used to be about 30,000 naira. The minimum wage has been increased. It's now more than double. States are now receiving sometimes triple what they used to get from the federal allocation. You know, like I'm going to mention a state like Anambra State, where Peter Obi is from. Anambra State is almost receiving triple what they used to receive from the federal allocation. If you look at a state like Lagos State, for instance, now you've seen that local government autonomy is now working in Lagos State. I was talking about it on Twitter, it went viral, and the local government chairman actually came and thanked me. A local government in Lagos is actually building a 300-unit housing estate. Yeah. They built 12 schools. They built a big office complex. That's because local government autonomy is now making sure that allocation is going down to the local government. So we are seeing that the reforms in Nigeria are working.
All right, then. You know, some people say they agree with you that indeed these reforms are working, but in the face of global challenges, especially the recent trade tariffs imposed by the U.S. President Donald Trump, people are watching to see how this administration will reinvent itself, build resilience of the economy to be able to withstand these trade or tariff shockwaves from the United States, because there are concerns that even the target set in the 2025 budget might not be met. And some people are even saying that the recent Fitch ratings might just be short-lived.
Well, that doesn't make sense, because if you look at what happened, immediately President Trump announced a cooling of the tariffs for 90 days. What happened? The price of oil went up. But you got to understand that oil is just 15% of our GDP. So Nigeria is a very unique country in the fact that because of reforms, not just by this administration, beginning from the Babangida administration, about 85% of our GDP is in the hands of the private sector. And when you're looking at that, now if you look at what's happening in a state like Lagos, before the Bola Tinubu administration came in, Lagos had an economy of $100 billion GDP. Right now, Lagos has an economy of $259 billion GDP. So that means that in this period of about 2 years of the Bola Tinubu reform, the GDP of Lagos has expanded by almost 3%, almost 300%. If you look at someone like Aliko Dangote, when Bola Tinubu became president on May 29, 2023, his net worth was about $14 billion. That's an approximate. Right now, his net worth is almost double that, because the reforms are working. Because what you have to understand there is that if you have captains of industry, the organized private sector, these are the people that actually employ more people than the federal and the state government. So when these people are actually improving, it means that the economy is improving. They're going to be employing more people. They're going to be paying people better wages. I'll give another example. Peter Obi, who was talking about, the economy has collapsed, he has interest in the bank. Now, because of my relationship with some people in that bank, I'm not going to mention the name of that bank, but that bank has seen their profit before tax increase by about 300%. So even because of Bola Tinubu's reforms, more money is going into Peter Obi's pockets. So we need to look at data. We can't look at emotions. Anybody can just wake up and say, I'm suffering. No. We're not good. Those are emotions. We can only work with data. And the reason why it's important for these governments to rebut some of these things that people like Peter Obi are saying is because if you don't rebut fallacies today, tomorrow they become facts.
All right, then. I know you've also been watching and seeing the intense effort by people in the opposition to coalesce with the singular purpose of unseating President Bola Tinubu. in 2027. We have seen the visits to the former president, Muhammadu Buhari, by the APC chairman, the APC governors, the, should I say, PDP, Atiku, El-Rufai, and just a mix of opposition politicians now. And there are now speculations about a strained relationship between President Bola Tinubu and former President Muhammadu Buhari. How significant is the relationship between these two men, and how does it really maybe impact the politics of 2027?
Well, there is absolutely no straining of the relationship between President Bola Tinubu and former President Muhammadu Buhari. And how do we know this? Because 2 weeks ago, former President Buhari issued a statement affirming that he is loyal to the APC and to President Bola Tinubu, and that his relationship with the president remains intact. And he specifically disavowed Malam Nasir El-Rufai and said that Malam Nasir El-Rufai did not leave the party based on his blessings, and he is not involved in his leaving the party. So Nigerians should go and read that statement. A lot of what's been happening right now is because people like Malam Nasir El-Rufai did not get what they wanted. Malam Nasir El-Rufai wanted to be a minister. Unfortunately, the National Assembly rejected him based on security clearance. And because of that, he's been very bitter. He's one of the people who's been spreading this fallacy that President Bola Tinubu has been giving a lopsided appointments to people from the Southwest. Thank God for the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation that released a list, and it showed that no, that's not true, that the North, especially the Northwest, had gotten the bulk of the appointments under this current administration. And if you look at it, President Bola Tinubu is running one of the most balanced governments, because if you take the Federal Character Commission, if you take federal character is not the only thing that you look into when giving appointments. You also look at population. So Nigeria has 6 geopolitical zones. The Northwest is the most populated part of Nigeria. We have something like about 27% of our population in the Northwest. And the Northwest has the bulk of the appointments under President Bola Tinubu, followed by the Southwest, which is the next most populated zone, which about 19% of our population, followed by the North Central, which is the next most populated zone. And then you have the South-South, you have the Northeast, you have the Southeast. So President Bola Tinubu has been balanced. These people who are coalescing, they've said it. They said they are coalescing to get power. They are not coalescing to build the economy. They are not coalescing for the sake of Nigeria. And it just shows that they do not even know how to control the narrative. It's so unfortunate that Malam Nasir El-Rufai is saying these things and sponsoring people to say these things, saying that part of the people from the North that President Bola Tinubu appointed are Yorubas. It doesn't make sense, because are you going to say that these people who are of Yoruba origin, who are from the North, they are no longer Northerners? Because you are going to attack the very basis of political power in the North, which is one monolithic North, a hegemony. We've had Northern leaders. Sardana of Sokoto, when he was in power, his secretary was a Yoruba man from the North, Sunday Awoniyi. And Sunday Awoniyi, he had a nickname at that time. He was called Sardauna Karami, which means Little Sardana. That's to show you how in the North, they were not looking at ethnicity. They were looking at themselves as one monolithic North. So the question the North has to ask themselves now is that, is Malam Nasir El-Rufai's political ambition what destroyed that one monolithic North? Because people are watching.
All right.
You've got other northern minorities in places like, I just need to say this. You've got other northern minorities in places like Benue State, who through their language and their history and their culture, they are connected to the people of the Southeast. And they're going to be asking themselves, if people like Malam Nasir El-Rufai and others can be rejecting other northerners based on their ethnicities, one day, if a future Nigerian president comes and appoints us, these people will say, oh, we are not northerners. We are
I need to throw this in quickly before we go.
Has to be very question. Sorry?
I'm sorry, I need to ask this question before we wrap up. We're running out of time. I just need to answer this. I watched an interview where former President Olusegun Obasanjo was saying that, why the country is where it is at this point is because President Bola Tinubu came to office unprepared. He made reference to some declarations by President Tinubu when he took office, the removal of the fuel subsidy, floating of the Naira, and some other policy reform statements that he made. He said it's because President Bola Tinubu was not prepared, and a lot of the situations Nigeria have had to face because of all of these ongoing reforms could have been avoided, that a proper study was not done before some of these pronouncements were made. How would you respond to that, especially now that we're seeing the reports or the ratings by Fitch, upgrading Nigeria to B from B minus?
Well, let's focus on what cannot lie. I have a maximum respect for former President Olusegun Obasanjo, but we're going to focus on what cannot lie. If you say that President Bola Tinubu was not prepared for office, look, if you go back to the campaigns, what did President Bola Tinubu say he was going to do? He said he was going to do 4 cardinal things. He was going to remove false subsidy, he was going to float the naira, he was going to bring about local government autonomy, and he was going to provide student loans. He said that this was what he was going to do during the campaigns. Right now, 2 years in office, he has done each and every of those things. And that is just a prima facie example of somebody who was prepared for leadership. And then if you go back again, if you look at something like fuel subsidy was costing Nigeria so much money, I think it was costing us about $1.2 billion every month. Now, that was not money that we had, it was money that we were borrowing. But a lot of Nigerians don't know that even beyond fuel subsidy, we were spending $1.5 billion subsidizing the naira. And Nigeria could not afford that. So if you look at our debt profile right now, a lot of people make the mistake because when you compare debt profile, normally what people tend to do is that they look at quarters. So on a quarterly basis, from the third quarter to the fourth quarter, our debt has gone up. But if you take the debt that President Bola Tinubu inherited from the Buhari administration and compare it to the debt now, our debt has actually reduced. And the reason why our debt has reduced is because we have cut out these wasteful expenditures.
It is. All right, then we must go now. I must thank you very much for your time. It's always a delight speaking with you, Reno Omokri, political analyst, columnist, and author. Thank you very much for your time on the program.
Thank you for having me, and may God bless you.
Thanks. God bless you too. Well, that's it on the program this week. You can see a repeat of this particular episode at 11 p.m. today. You can also watch this episode again on TVC News YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. I am Femi Akonde. See you next time.